Now let's head over to Tel Aviv in Israel to speak to Middle East expert Tom Gross. Tom, thanks for joining me here on A News. Always a pleasure to see you, sir. Thanks a lot. Right, I mean, first of all, really, off the top of my head, I can think is, first question is why? Why now? What's happened? What's happened to PM Bennett? What's gone wrong?
Well, no one, or hardly anyone, really expected this coalition to last very long in the first place. It only had a one-seat majority from the start. It had, there were 7 or 8 different parties in the coalition with very disparate views from left to right, from secular to religious, including an Arab party and Jewish parties and settler parties. So from the beginning, no one thought it would last this long. It has been losing some defectors to the right in the last few days. And Lapid, the foreign minister, and Bennett, the prime minister, decided to take preemptive action last night and dissolve the Knesset and call early elections because they were worried that some of the defectors could join with the Likud leader, the opposition leader, former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and he could form a government without new elections. At least with new elections, there's a chance that a similar centrist coalition will once again gain power. So they took preemptive action in a way last night. And Bennett has the unfortunate position of being the shortest serving prime minister in Israeli history. The coalition celebrated its first anniversary just last week. But in some ways, I think it was actually a success, and it's surprising it lasted more than a year in the first place.
Okay.
If I just might add one thing, there's in a way a problem in Israel in that in some ways Israel is too democratic. In other words, it's too easy to form your own political party and enter the parliament, the Knesset. It's rather factional and tribal. That's why there are so many different parties in the Knesset. It would be like if, for example, in the US Congress in America, you had a party representing, say, cannabis smokers in California, and another party representing churchgoers in Texas, and one representing Spanish speakers in Miami or steelworkers in Pittsburg, and you had dozens of little parties. It would be so difficult to put together a coalition that would then last. So, in a way, Israel, in some senses, is too democratic.
You see,
that leads to instability.
That's a great analysis, actually, and helping us understand really what's going on. So if Lapid does take the reins, as it looks like he will do, will he have full power like any other prime minister? Or, as you said a minute ago, you were saying that somehow there could be elections that was happening beforehand, or... Anyway, let's go step by step. Will Lapid have any powers as PM?
Okay, well, there is talk that an election will be scheduled for October the 25th. In other words, a little over 4 months from now. The government actually wants to dissolve itself very quickly, and there's going to be a motion already tomorrow morning. Again, as I said, they're trying to stop Netanyahu managing to put together a government with the existing members of Knesset. So Lapid, if this goes to plan, Lapid, who's presently the foreign minister, will become interim prime minister for 4 months. Now, usually one would think that is a very lame duck position to be in. However, there's always action and stuff going on in Israel. So in 3 weeks from now, on I think it's July 12th, President Joe Biden of America is scheduled to visit Israel. As part of his first trip to the Middle East, he's also going to be visiting the West Bank, and then he's going to go on, perhaps most controversially, to meet the Saudi Crown Prince in Riyadh. But anyway, the American ambassador to Israel has confirmed this morning that President Biden will go ahead with his visit, even though he will be meeting the interim Prime Minister Lapid. The visit is primarily connected to the Iranian nuclear program, which moves ahead at some speed and is of great concern to Israel and many other countries in the Middle East. And I think, Lapid will continue governing in a way, because he's just been foreign minister. Although he'll be prime minister, he will continue largely on foreign policy in the next few months. Of course, at the same time, he will be running for re-election, so he'll be engaged in an election campaign. And it will, in theory, give him advantage to be interim prime minister in that campaign, because he could appear prime ministerial. He'll get the photo op with the American president, possibly others. He's scheduled to visit Turkey as foreign minister shortly. Maybe he'll go now as interim prime minister to Turkey. It's part of a kind of reconciliation between the Turkish and Israeli governments, which is ongoing. So he will look prime ministerial. How much he can actually get done in domestic policy, I doubt very much, because it will be a lame duck government with all these different parties now going their own ways and campaigning for re-election.
Interesting. You say that Lapid will, in essence, be sort of like interim prime minister. Will he have any powers to stop another government forming? I mean, like you said, Netanyahu could be looking to form some sort of coalition. Does he have the powers to stop that happening?
Well, yes, because they will dissolve the parliament.
Right.
The bill they're going to enter into government tomorrow morning will dissolve the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, and call elections. So that's why they're trying to rush through this bill. Look, anything can happen. Netanyahu, who is a bit of a political magician, could pull some, rabbit out of the hat by offering some plum jobs to one or two defectors from the existing coalition and try and cobble together a government. But I think it's unlikely. There's one more threat to Netanyahu, though. Netanyahu at the present time is ahead in the polls by some way, and he's probably the favourite to be next prime minister 4 months from now after the elections. Wow. However, another leader of the party, Avigdor Lieberman, who's the finance minister, is trying to introduce a rushed bill, I think even today, through the government, saying that anybody who's being investigated with some indictment, some criminal indictment, and that would mean Netanyahu will not be able to become prime minister. Netanyahu has some charges against him. He says he's innocent and these charges are politically motivated. His opponents say he is corrupt. Lieberman is trying to rush through a bill saying that anyone with charges against them cannot be prime minister until the legal process has finished. So that is one other possibility at stopping Netanyahu making a comeback, although I think it's unlikely to succeed.
Right, because you said he has to rush it through the Knesset before it gets dissolved tomorrow.
I guess so. I'm not quite sure of the process of it, but this is something that's just come up today.
Sure. Tom, let me ask you, what's the sort of the pulse on the street, if you like? I mean, how have people reacted? How have the local newspapers sort of picked this up? Are the people sort of shocked? Are they happy?
Well, there is differing views. So a lot of people are in despair because this will be Israel's 5th general election in just over 3 years. Each election involves about 4 months of campaigning and then another couple of months of haggling to form a coalition. In those 6 months, it's very difficult to govern. So, for example, Tel Aviv is finally building a really extensive metro, a subway, a train system. These kind of things take a lot of planning over many years, and you need proper budgeting. And it's very bad if the finance minister changes and the transport minister changes and the different political parties and so on. So people want stability. They don't want to keep on going to elections. Elections in Israel can be quite rough and tumble, with lots of shouting and all kinds of election marches and rallies and posters all over the place. They're also quite expensive because there's so many parties and each party gets subsidies from the state. So at a time when Israel, like most other countries, is witnessing some inflation and some beginnings of economic uncertainty, a lot of people do not want to be wasting a lot of time, energy and money going to yet another set of elections. Having said that, supporters of Netanyahu on the right are very happy because they want their, leader back in power. He does have a lot of support, Netanyahu. To remind viewers, he's already been prime minister. He's won election on 4 separate occasions. He's already Israel's longest standing prime minister in Israeli history. But he remains a kind of political giant on the Israeli stage and even internationally. And right now he is favourite to win an election again. The opposition parties are divided about many things, but what brings them together is a desire to prevent Netanyahu coming back. They think he's been in power too long. They think he's a divisive figure. He can also be, how can I put it, Netanyahu has a lot of skills and he can be a statesman, but he can also be a slightly more sophisticated version of Donald Trump in the sense that he can be divisive and say things that are rude or anger segments of the population and so on. Whereas the outgoing government has been rather sort of almost gentlemanly. It's almost very un-Israeli or un-Middle Eastern that they've all got along rather well and not shouted at each other and almost been like a team and teamwork. Whereas Netanyahu is much more the leader and he's a sort of strong man. So it depends what you want. In every society we see in Russia and America and in other countries, even in Britain with Boris Johnson or Putin or Trump, some people want a strong, decisive leader who is very much the leader. Other people want a government that's a bit more, compromising and more about sharing power, which is what the government that's just lost power in Israel represented.
Indeed. It's going to be very interesting these next few months. Tom Gross, as always, a pleasure to talk to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care and stay safe.